Can anybody see my screen or hear me talk? So good evening, everyone. I'm starting to see some people trickle in here. Give me a heads up. Somebody can just type in the chat box if you can hear me. Um, and I'll give you guys a few minutes to get more people in here. All right, folks. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the last webinar of this summer webinar series. My name is Alvin. I am an MCPHS Sanofi Genzyme Fellow focused on U.S. medical managed care. And today, the purpose of this webinar is we're going to talk about different commercial roles in pharma from a very high-level overview. And just so you guys are aware, if you guys have any questions you'd like me to answer at the end of this presentation, please feel free to input it in your chat box and I will get to them at the end of the presentation. We have about 30 minutes or so today, and so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick disclaimer to just highlight that this content here represents my views only and does not reflect the views of Sanofi Genzyme or MCPHS as a whole. And going over the objectives for today's webinar, we're really going to focus on what the different job functions are under the commercial umbrella. We're going to provide a high-level overview of those cross-functional interactions between different commercial roles. And we're going to identify, because this is much more relevant for you guys, what is the role of a pharmacist with this commercial landscape? Quickly, let me give you guys all a background of myself. So again, my name's Alvin. I went to University of North Carolina, Eshelman School of Pharmacy. So a big Tar Heel fan. Looking forward to the basketball year. We're going to definitely whoop some butt this year. And I am the current medical managed care fellow here at MCPHS Sanofi Genzyme, as I mentioned. So this program is a rotational program with a mix of being in medical managed care in the field and headquarters for pretty much the duration of the 2-year fellowship. But we also have an HEOR longitudinal component to it as well. Other core rotations that I rotate through include the medical science liaison role, so understanding what that field role perspective is from a medical science and physician side, and then U.S. market access as well. So I hear that my audio is going in and out. Let me see if I can fix that. All right. Yes, thanks to Kristen who mentioned using Chrome. If you're on Internet Explorer, it's probably not working quite as well. But either way, let me know if you guys have any further issues later on. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have through email or through the duration of this presentation as well. So to give you guys, to get back to the this presentation today, so we're talking about commercial role. And so I want to preface this presentation by saying, again, I'm a medical managed care fellow, and I'm fortunate because I get to rotate in medical, but also in commercial in a more market access perspective. And so for those of you who are very interested in a commercial role, today's overview is really going to be just that, a high level overview. And as you go through your fellowship search, whether it be this year or down the road, you'll start, digging your research, trying to figure out what the different commercial roles are, and then identify which ones you see a natural fit for. But with that being said, if you have any specific questions from a commercial perspective, you feel free to let me know as well, because I work very closely with my commercial fellows and my commercial counterparts, and so I'd be happy to redirect your question to the appropriate parties. So commercial umbrella, when people say what is a pharmacist role in commercial, what does commercial do? This umbrella and this picture here gives a good brief background on the different functions in commercial. So we're going to go through a few of these today from a high-level perspective: marketing, market research, CI, forecasting, new products planning, and business development. And by the end of this presentation, hopefully you have a better understanding of what that entails. So first, marketing. And I think marketing is pretty self-explanatory and very straightforward. Many of you guys are probably familiar with this role, but it's essentially identifying what the needs of the consumers are and how to communicate that product's value to that target consumer. So it's important for you as a marketing fellow or marketing role in pharma to first identify what that consumer is. It could be patients, it could be physicians, it could be payers. And depending on that end audience, your communication and how you develop these materials from a marketing perspective will definitely change, right? So I talked about the direct-to-consumer marketing, which you see in TV quite often today. Payer marketing, that's more of my speed right there, because I'm in the market access field, and so I'm rotating through a payer marketing role right now as we speak, which is a very interesting experience, and it really lends itself very complementary to a lot of the medical outcomes liaison role that I'm currently doing as well. And of course, physician marketing. So you have sales reps who have to bring in materials for physicians. So again, an audience differs, and as a result, your materials for marketing changes as well. So when you look at this chart here, this is one way to look at it is as the life cycle of a product, from product development to intro to growth to maturity and eventually to decline. And as you can imagine, marketing plays a role pretty much throughout this entire process. But marketing is going to change depending on what stage you're in. So during the product development stage, for example, marketing will have a voice because here you're going to have to start developing what that pricing strategy is. You're going to have to identify what your product strengths are as well as its weaknesses, and how do you differentiate that product from other competitors out there. So in an introduction phase, marketing could be the highest at the stage cycle because now the product has been approved, it's been introduced to the market, and now we're going to start seeing some steady growth. In a growth phase, again, marketing is still growing. It can become more targeted because by now you have more mature data and you have data to identify where the needs are. And so you can develop marketing materials that are more specifically tailored to that specific audience. During the drug maturity phase, marketing could potentially slow here because the product has become mature. It's pretty well established. And one way to look at it at this phase is marketing could, you start trying to position the product and the brand more synonymously with quality and reliability, so that you can prolong that maturity phase for as long as possible. And unexpected, as you guys know, all branded products eventually suffer through the decline phase. Here, you suffer from increased competition, reduced market share, and all of this plays a role in this decline phase of marketing. And so marketing here may diminish, but there might be still small things that marketing can have a role in to defend its current position. And I gave you guys really a quick synopsis of this product life cycle, but this marketing and how it plays a role in these different stages, it's going to change depending on the product. And so today I'm just trying to give you a flavor of just your average product or whatever it may be. But it may change depending on what product you're working for. So market research was the second piece of the commercial umbrella we talked about. And here we're really gathering and analyzing and interpreting those informations from the market using consumers' needs and preferences. And so primary research is what I want to get into more here. The top function here, you can see that in market research, you could do different surveys, different focus groups, different interviews. And here is where the market research plays. So you get a lot of the feedback and the insights you receive from focus groups, from different targeted audience to help develop some of your more commercial strategy, right? And so my experience with this as a student was working at various consulting firms, because as consulting companies, we contract with manufacturers, for example, to help their market research to identify what the consumer needs are, whether it be payers or physicians or patients, and identify what that unmet need is and how we can position our product from that perspective. Competitive intelligence. I think a lot of you guys have probably heard of this, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the action of analyzing the intelligence about products, customers, competitors, and really anything that deals with your competitors when it comes to strategic decision making for your organization. And so some of the key things that a person in a competitive intelligence role may play in would be identifying what those new entrants to the market are, whether it be in preclinical trials still, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. It's really keeping the entire organization abreast of all the incoming entrants and what the future competition may look like. We may look at mergers and acquisitions. So competitive intelligence for mergers and acquisitions, we could talk about what the impact of CVS Health and Aetna merging, or different kinds of mergers, or Amazon buying PillPack, right? These are different kinds of mergers and acquisitions that could have a direct impact on your book of business. So that's important to note as well. Any changes in medical practice or guidelines, which could impact market dynamics, and then as well as any changes in formularies. Now we're looking from a payer perspective. So, these are just some of the different roles and some of the responsibilities a competitive intelligence person could have in this space. So this figure, again, just highlights how important it is to have competitive intelligence. We could see here that there's quite a few marketed products depending on the therapeutic area you're in. but even more so, and could be more so threatening, are all the pipelines coming out, especially the ones that show promise. So this is really where competitive intelligence plays in. They identify what some of those threats are from competitor products, and they use that information to help develop strategy from a commercial perspective. Forecasting and analytics, again, this is one of those other key umbrellas. I'm not quite as familiar on how you do this in this as a pharmacist, but the idea is to make these predictions for the future based on past and present data, and a lot of this is typically by analyzing trends. So a good example would be this table below, where you're looking at company A, B, C, and D have different therapies out on the market, or potentially different competitors coming to market, right? And how does that market share change depending on the present and looking into the future? And so making those market share predictions will really impact not only clinical guidelines, but also from a payer access perspective, formulary positioning. So forecasting analytics, very important. We have a team of people who are responsible for this. New products planning is another key role in commercial. And so this is the idea and the process of creating a product idea and following through until that product is introduced to market. So new products planning is a very interesting role, because now you're providing commercial guidance and those commercial insights for products in early development. So, one of the misconceptions is commercial only plays in the later stages, but really they play all the way from preclinical all the way to marketing and post-marketing and post-launch, right? One good example is if you have a preclinical drug here and it's at a breaking point where you see some results, maybe it's not as groundbreaking as you originally thought it was compared to what you expected to see. Commercial may have to have a say here and really identify whether this is a product that should continue to be developed. So these are important roles for commercial positions to play in at these key decision points. And a lot of these roles, they do so with that, I think my slightly frozen here. So let me just open it up for any questions you guys may have, because that really is the end of this commercial perspective. There's only about 26 of you on the line, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Commercial roles that are internal, so for marketing, for example, they're more in-house, so you're going to be in office for 60-70% of your time. Competitive intelligence, you're probably in the office quite a bit as well. But some of the more commercial roles where you may have to travel a lot would be sales rep is a good example, because you're in the field, you cover a certain territory, and you are going to be that point of contact for physicians, right? We have something called the field account executives, at least at Sanofi Genzyme, that's what it's called. Now, these are your higher up than sales reps, but instead of dealing with physicians, they are the point of contact in the field-facing individual for payers. So your PBMs, your health plans, and so those require a little bit more additional touch points, but it's very similar. You travel depending on your region, and you are required to keep those touch points. Other than that, commercial does have to go to a lot of these different conferences that you see. So, every big therapeutic area will have a big conference, right? And so when you think of these medical booths or these commercial booths where they present a lot of their branded materials, or they try to talk to physicians or payers or whatever it may be, those competitive intelligence people in the commercial role will, a lot of commercial people will be in the field to cover some of those conferences. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'd be happy to take 10 minutes more of questions. So Lauren has a question here. What are some commercial roles that are mostly quantitative or include components of finance? That is a great question. And to be honest, I am not the best person to speak on that because I personally have not gone into those specific functional roles. But what I would say is, even though there may not be a fellowship available, right, in something that's more finance related, there are a lot of, obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of pharmaceutical industry jobs out there in finance, right, or along those lines. And so, with finance specifically, some of the key things that I can think of from a payer perspective would be contracting, could be pricing and strategy, right? So those are two key commercial roles that are more in-house, but they're responsible for certain accounts, and they deal with the contracting and the pricing to get whatever the company's drug is on formulary, whether it be how much rebates they get or how much access they get. So those are some of the more quantitative roles from a commercial perspective. Ashley asks, can you explain your role as a medical managed care fellow? My audio was cutting in and out that time. For sure, I can definitely help you out with that. For my role as a medical managed care fellow, I'm pretty fortunate to have this position. When I went through the fellowship search, I was looking for something that kind of hit the bucks for me from a field perspective. So I wanted to be in the field. I wanted to do something that had components of health economics and outcomes research. However, I wasn't committed to doing a full 2-year, full research-based fellowship. And I also wanted to do something where I could cross over from a payer perspective, not only on medical, but also see what the market access side from a commercial perspective. That's those field account executives I just mentioned about 5 minutes ago. And so I've been very fortunate to get that fellowship, because in this fellowship, I rotate through these different core functions. So I sit on the medical managed care team and I sit on the medical umbrella. However, I get to rotate through commercial functions, and these next 3 months actually rotating through a payer marketing role. So it's been a great experience. And overall, it's really complemented what I've seen being in the field from a medical perspective, seeing their discussions with payers, and then complement that to see, from an internal commercial role in payer marketing, how do they think about developing the materials they do to give to their commercial field counterparts? And then not only that, but then seeing how it's being utilized in the field to payers. And then for me, from a medical perspective, seeing how that overlap or that interaction is from, me as a medical fellow to the commercial field account executive role. So hope that answers some of your questions, but happy to answer more if you want more details later on. Crystal asks, did you know you always want to do a commercial fellowship? So let me preface again. I know my audio's been in and out, so I apologize for that. But I am actually in a medical fellowship. However, I'm fortunate that I get to rotate through commercial functions. And so one of the commercial functions I'm rotating through right now is a payer marketing role, because it very closely overlaps with my role as a medical managed care outcomes liaison. And so I did not know if I wanted to do medical or commercial. And so me, again, I was very fortunate to see something that had components of medical, because I wanted to use my pharmacy degree and wanted to use my clinical expertise, but also see what, how do PharmDs use that clinical expertise on the commercial side, and what are some PharmDs roles in a payer aspect. So Crystal, I hope that answers your question there. Mercy, what are the demands of your type of fellowship, and what type of preparations are useful to have prior to starting a fellowship besides a rotation? So the demands of my fellowship, again, because it's field based, I do travel on average about once every 2 weeks. Some months are worse than others. Some months I'm home based more often, and that's fine with me. You just try to find a good balance for yourself, and it's very negotiable with your fellowship director. Um, as far as the demands of my fellowship, what are some of the work I do? So a lot of things I do is obviously having to go through I have to go through an internal certification process because in my team, we cover multiple sclerosis, oncology, as well as rheumatoid arthritis and atopic dermatitis with the potential indications coming out. So, the demands are quite high right now because, I will have a chance to get launch experience, which is obviously exciting. But with that, you also have to be, internally certified from the company so that they trust in you to deliver some of these clinical presentations when it comes to your payer accounts. And so a big part of my starting point was going through all these different training programs to make sure that I was certified from a medical managed care perspective. And this is the same certification that my medical managed care directors actually go through as well. So that's been very fruitful for me. Clearly, you have to be very strong in presentation skills, understanding what your audience needs are. Clearly, this has not been the most ideal because of audio issues. However, these are some of the key things you have to kind of work through because it's not always going to be peachy. So you have to just manage it appropriately and move forward. Other than that, you also have a lot of internal projects that you work on. So being in the field means you have to use certain resources that are approved by the company. And so one of the strategic perspectives, not giving presentations, but from a strategic standpoint, is what kind of internal research are we doing? What kind of collaborations are we doing with payers or with specialty pharmacies or with PBMs or with IDNs, accountable care organizations, different accounts? And how can we develop more research that is more valuable in the field, right? So thinking of it from a strategic perspective as in what kind of materials does the field team need to deliver these presentations that will resonate with a payer? So, that gives you a taste of some of the different demands of my fellowship. And as far as what types of preparations are useful prior to starting this fellowship, there's no clear-cut answer. For example, for my fellowship, it would have been very useful to have had some kind of internship or rotation in a pharmacy benefit manager, a health plan, or even HEOR program. Me personally, I did a lot of more consulting internships and consulting rotations. And so a little bit of straying from the beaten path, but not too far off. But in short, it's really no clear-cut answer. So Mercy, I hope that helps answer some of your questions. Lauren has a question on what has a job outlook been in the past and have fellows been hired on as outcomes liaison. Lauren, that is an excellent question because it seems like you are familiar with this role, and outcomes liaisons are generally far more difficult to get into right off the bat. So for example, most outcomes liaisons have had tons of experience in either as an MSL for years, or they've had experience from the payer side working at a PBM or health plan for a few years before coming onto the outcomes liaison role, or they have a very strong background in HEOR and know the technical skills with that. And so clearly it's not quite as easy as some of the other fellowships to get a role in that. But, my standpoint has always been, this has been always the field I wanted to get into when I was in pharmacy school, right? And so if you put in the good work and you have strong letters of recommendation and you have people in your company who are willing to back you up and give you an opportunity, it certainly can be done. And so to give you an idea of what that job outlook is, more recently for us, is my second year fellow. He actually did not get retained by our company, but he got an outcomes liaison role or their equivalent at a different pharmaceutical company, which again is very difficult to do, but it shows that, him being the first fellow in this role, that there is potential to do something like that, right? To skip a few steps if you do your work properly. Other things that people have done is you go into this fellowship and they'll work to retain you depending on how hard your work ethic is and how much they like you, right? So some people in this role will decide maybe medical isn't for me and want to do still the payer side, but want to go into a more commercial role. So, potentially you now have the experience of carrying the bag, if you will. You've been in the field, you've seen what those discussions are like from a payer perspective. So maybe you'll have a better shot at getting more internal marketing roles, maybe not payer, but also other product marketing from physician or patients, whatever it may be. So yeah, hope that answers the question. And just my best advice for that is you just gotta really put your head down and do the necessary work. Mercy, consulting would be some of your we call them vendors, but these would be some of your life science groups who, when pharmaceutical companies have to do materials, and the pharma company, whoever it is on the other side as a point of contact, will work with them from a strategic perspective and from an oversight perspective in terms of guiding them on what they're looking for. So again, hope that helps. Kawan, apologize if I'm butchering your name. I understand this may be a competitive field fellowship to obtain, but I was wondering if you could recommend any advice to get involved while attending pharmacy school. Absolutely. So I'll just give you my background. So when I went through pharmacy school at UNC for 4 years, I knew immediately I didn't want to do hospital. I did not want to do retail. And so really it was seeking outside of your clinical opportunities to kind of carve your own path, right? And so for us, we had a recently established AMCP chapter. So AMCP is Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. And so knowing that was one of the few organizations that were not so clinically related, I took a stab at it, checked it out, wondered if this was something I wanted to get involved in. And I have to say it was a very fruitful decision for me because, through that experience and become very actively involved in that specific organization, I was able to network. I was able to get involved with the PNT competition. I was able to leverage some of those connections with nearby pharma companies to kind of help build our AMCP chapter. And knowing that really reaffirmed my commitment and my passion for this particular field, right? And so using that experience, it kind of helped tailor my rotation schedule my 4th year to really give me a well-rounded experience when applying for fellowships. But I think for you, Kawan, is, I think the key thing here is, find what it is you're looking for. And I know everybody always complains about how school is very clinically driven, and it should be, right? Pharmacy school should be very clinically oriented, clinically driven, but it's not for everyone. And that shouldn't stop you from seeking your own opportunities, whether it be out of state or if it's in your backyard, even better, right? So just find your path and find your niche and your passion for whatever it is you want to do, and you'll be able to start getting involved in that way. And Mercy, no worries. Consulting. So hope you can hear this, but in short, pharma companies, sometimes they want to do these research and sometimes they don't have the internal resources to do it. And so they pay consulting firms, life science consulting firms, for example, to help to outsource some of that research. And so as a person on the pharmaceutical company, sometimes we have to work with consulting firms quite a bit to help drive some of the strategic decisions and guide the consulting firm to help develop the materials that you are looking for. So I hope that gives you an idea of consulting versus pharmaceutical company. Valicia, in your role as a fellow, are your daily tasks very structured and guided, or do you typically do more independent thinking in producing deliverables? Great question. And for me, and I think for you guys who are interested in being independent and not being micromanaged, and you want to be in the field, this is probably one of the positions for you. Reason being is my entire team is field-based, right? So my boss lives an hour away. My boss's boss lives in Virginia. My boss's boss's boss lives in St. Louis, right? So in the home office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it's me and my incoming first-year fellow, right? So I think what's really critical, especially in my role as a fellow, is it's not guided. It's somewhat structured, depending on how structured you are as an individual. But a lot of it is you're doing a lot of independent thinking and producing these deliverables, right? Because nobody's going to handhold you because nobody's there to handhold you. And so it's important that, especially when I started out, is to ask a lot of questions to better understand what my role is and And once you've, I'm a year in, so clearly I don't have to ask as many questions as I used to, but I still continuously ask questions just to make sure I'm on track. And ultimately, it's up to you to make sure that you get your job done, you produce the deliverables needed in a timely manner. And your team will appreciate that even more because that's very critical for a person who is interested in a field-based role, whether it be medical, commercial, or payers, physicians, whatever it may be. Proactivity and being independent is one of the most important attributes to have in this specific role. So, Valisha, I hope that answers your question. Lauren, no issues. I'm actually quite happy that you guys have questions and are intrigued. So let's see. Can you talk more about your interview experience and what you think made you stand out as a candidate? Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So for me, I'll be perfectly honest. There is no one answer fit all, right? I think for me, the biggest thing that I will tell everybody that I speak to is you really have to show passion for your position, right? Because you think about ASHP and PPS and you're interviewing for all these different roles, and that person on the other side of you interviewing you have seen 20 different other candidates, right? Assuming they've already done their phone screens ahead of time. And so, what makes a person stand out to me is how well do they understand the role, right? What is your experience, and whether it be directly relevant or indirectly relevant, can you talk about your experience and how that relates to this field, and then definitely just your passion, right? We can easily tell if you are more or less bullshitting your way through an interview, or you really are passionate about the field and you really want that position, right? And so I think those three things were some of the big reasons what made me stood out as a candidate. And of course, and this is true for every position out there, networking helps, and building a good relationship and understanding, what the interviewers are looking for definitely helps. So give you guys a good example of this would be, in this job as a field-based medical outcomes liaison role, one of the key things we need to do is being able to understand what our audience's needs are, because one payer is going to be different than the next payer, right? So when interviewing for a position like this, it's really the same and just in a different body. You really have to understand, what do you from talking to your interviewers, what do you think they're looking for? What makes you a good fit for the team, right? And if you understand that, you'll be able to tailor your interview that really hits the buckets that they're looking for. Because it's not so much what you're trying to display, but it has to be more of, how does what you display resonate with what the interviewers are looking for? So, Lauren, I hope that answers your question. I think that's I think that's just in general for everyone listening. I think that's a good interview tactic to have. And so, I hope you guys are interested in fellowships down the road. Erica, I will be doing an internship in pharma industry soon. What kind of questions should I ask fellows while I'm there working? Also, what should I do there to show that I'm really up for this fellowship? So the kind of questions that you should be asking, well, the first thing you should be doing is you should be able to show that you're responsible, you can deliver your projects and your deliverables in a timely manner, and that you can really show your team that you don't need to be handheld with project work. So when you're given a task, that you are you understand what needs to be done, and that you can drive the project forward, right? Because the last thing anyone wants to do is handhold you, right? Because everybody's busy doing their different things. So make sure you ask questions, especially if this is your first internship or you're new to the field, and identify what those what the needs are, and be a quick learner. So the quicker you get up to speed with the project work, the more likely you'll be doing more tangible project, and the better results it will be. And so when you're in the internship and you're asking questions to fellows, ask them some of those questions. Talk to them, ask them what their day-to-day responsibilities are. Talk to them about your interests, but again, show passion when doing it. And, really, really be genuinely interested when you ask these questions, and don't just ask your same questions that you may ask everyone. Do your background research, understand what their role is, and really try to get a grasp of what their field is. Right. And then, of course, ask them what they've seen in successful interns or successful fellows are versus those that haven't been successful. Because, even I can tell you, I've seen my fair share of successful or not successful. And, and there's a lot in between as well. Right. So keep that in mind as you're doing your internship. And I think you'll do great. Um, love the Tar Heel shout out. You're my favorite person now. All right, but I think we're getting close to the time limit here, guys, and I want to thank everybody for their undivided attention. Again, apologize for the audio issues, but I hope I've answered quite a few of your questions today. There will be a replay link, and I believe that you guys should have access to my email information afterwards. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to respond and get back to you in a timely manner.